Right. Good afternoon, everyone. Hello and welcome to the NJFPA virtual program on impact of re-entry on real estate. My name is Brian Tannenhaus. I am a member of the New Jersey Food Process Association Board of Directors, and also the chair of the Education Committee. For those of you who are not familiar with NJFPA, we are a community of food and beverage companies, suppliers, and service organizers that promote industry growth throughout the Garden State region through education, resource sharing, and strong member partnerships. So before beginning today's program, I want to thank our sponsors, M&T Bank and Stokes Equipment, apologize. Both companies have made significant contributions to NJFPA in monetarily and their time. Thank you for making it possible for us to bring valuable information to our community like what we are going to learn today. Please make sure to check our website and Facebook page for copies of previously recorded webinars. So I have the pleasure today to introduce and moderate today's program. And they will talk about the impact of reentry from the crisis on real estate at the micro and macro levels. More specifically, we will hear about the space needs to support e-commerce, industrial space for safety stock, configuring office space, refrigeration needs, and more. So first up will be Hans. First on our panel is Hans Erdenberger. He's the president of ENV, also known as Environetics, and has been practicing architecture for the past 26 plus years. Hans is also a certified member of the National Council of Architectural Review Board. Throughout his professional career, Hans has compiled an impressive portfolio of work in the corporate interiors, industrial, manufacturing, food service, hospitality, retail, and residential practice areas. His projects range from renovation projects of all sizes to major new developments. Our next panelist is Brian Hughes, who is a fourth-generation owner of Hughes Environmental Engineering, a full-service refrigeration and cold storage construction and service company. From a mom-and-pop business installing refrigeration systems for what is known as old-school New Jersey food companies, to a company with 80 employees and deep technical expertise in all things commercial and industrial refrigeration. Our third panelist is David Ricci, a partner at the Flynn Company. David joined the firm in November 1988 and is their senior marketing representative in the New Jersey region. He represents owners in leasing and sales within major business parks, as well as tenants and build-to-suit clients. David's expertise in land development, construction, and finance has made him a valuable asset for owners and users alike. So please note this webinar is being recorded and will be available on our Facebook page. We also encourage questions. Everyone but the panelists must be muted, everyone but the panelists will be muted, but please use the chat all feature to submit your question. We will monitor them as the program progresses and get to as many questions as possible. At the end of the program, please note the panelists will not be responding via the chat feature during the presentation. So over to you, David, to discuss on a macro level what is happening in the world of real estate for e-commerce and industrial space.
Thank you, Brian, and welcome to everyone. I apologize. I get the award for the worst video and the most boring backdrop, but I'm in my office, a satellite office, so I'll work with what I have. I was asked to sort of look at globally what impact coronavirus and the shutdown has had on the commercial real estate world. And when we talk in terms of commercial real estate, there's really kind of 5 food groups. So I'm going to run through 4 of them pretty quickly and then focus on industrial because I think that's most relevant to the folks in the audience. You've probably heard the problems that hospitality is having. Hospitality includes hotels, casinos, concert venues, sports venues. For those of you who provide food to the folks who then provide it to those venues, they've been shut down, and they're sort of in a bad way right now. There's really no light at the end of the tunnel that we can see as to when those venues are going to open back up. Multifamily is sort of the apartment sector that has, that has actually fared better than most thought, and I think demographics are such that that will continue to fare well after this sort of short-term pain that's being realized. Third food group will be office. From an office perspective, there's really two schools of thought on what's going to happen here. There's this whole idea of packing more people into smaller areas, and I'll let Hans talk to this since he's the architect. But people are getting away from that idea now. With this problem with coronavirus and COVID. So that would make the argument for needing, some estimates are 20 to 25% more office space if you're not doing hoteling or you're not doing benching, if you're familiar with that term, where you're packing a lot of people into an area. The other school of thought is that on office, people are used to working from home, as we're all probably doing on this call. And if companies can make the justification that efficiency hasn't dropped, they will likely continue to let them work from home. And that would then decrease the need for additional office space. Read an interesting article this morning that said yes and yes, both are true. And the net effect will be there shouldn't be any increase or decrease in office space, but what will be reconfigured is how we work. More people will be working remotely, and if you are in an office, you're going to be spread out further. Retail, I know some of you rely on the retail industry. It's really been a tale of two cities with retail. General retail and restaurants have been down, so if you're servicing a regional mall, let's say, you've been hurting these last few months. But if you're fast food, or if you're grocery, or if you're consumer goods like Walmart, Target, CVS, folks like that, they're knocking the cover off the ball right now and doing very, very well. Same store sales are way up. I do primarily industrial. I do manufacturing and distribution. And industrial is, by all indications, going to be the net winner, if there is such a thing. I don't mean to be crass, but if there is a positive coming out of this situation, it would be that industrial real estate values have actually increased throughout this COVID period. It's being driven primarily by three factors. The first that Brian mentioned is something called safety stock. Most US corporations now are indicating that they're going to need to increase their inventories by 5%. What that means in terms of square footage is, you increase US inventories by 5%, that's about 500 million square feet of new product. There's been an acceleration in e-commerce. I use kind of my mom as an example. She's going to be 80 years old, never thought of doing grocery shopping online. She kind of adapted and had to do that. So e-commerce is accelerating tremendously. It's going to hit 20% by 2024 or 2025. That was previously predicted to be 2030. So that's going to increase demand. And then the third thing is we're shortening the supply chain for a lot of companies. They're rethinking manufacturing overseas and bringing things, onshoring is a term you've probably heard. Specifically, cold storage is going to be a benefactor of all this. Demand for cold storage is at all-time highs and still increasing. So if you've got a cold storage building, if you've got a building freezer and cooler, the value of that building just went up by about 12 to 15% over the last 4 months.
Interesting, David. If I could interject a question here, how do you think this is all going to impact the future of food processing and distribution, i.e. demand, not design?
Yeah, not design. I'll let the engineer and the architect speak to design, but clearly demand is increasing. So when you look at the e-commerce universe, pre-COVID, about 11% of goods were purchased through e-commerce. As I mentioned, that was supposed to hit 20% by about 2030. Because of the changes made during coronavirus and people's need to buy things online, they're now saying that acceleration will probably hit 20% by 2024 or 2025. The largest part of that increase has been in grocery. So folks are buying groceries online more so than ever, and prepared meals. So prepackaged, meals. So that is already showing its head in terms of the need for increased capacity for distribution, downstream or pre-stream, I should say. It would obviously increase the need for manufacturing as well.
Thank you. Okay. Did you discuss the amount of square foot needed, distribution space needed to support e-commerce? I know you discussed your 5% increase in inventory levels, which would translate to about an additional 500 million square feet of new industrial space needed across the country. But could you provide a little bit of data on what it takes to support an e-commerce sale?
Right. Yeah. Thank you for that, Brian. So the statistics we use is that 1 square foot of retail equals about 3 to 4 square feet of industrial requirement. So for a company that is, let's use the Gap as an example. If the Gap has a store, 1 square foot will handle, so many dollars in sales, let's say. That equivalent dollar value in sales would be supported from a logistics standpoint, from an e-commerce standpoint, in 3 to 4 square feet of warehouse space. Even though it's triple to quadruple the amount, it's still less from a cost perspective to the retailer, because obviously the warehouse space is so much less expensive than retail, particularly in some of the higher end markets.
Okay, great. Thank you. Anything else from a micro or a macro standpoint?
Honestly, I'm looking forward to hearing what Brian and Hans have to say about some of the design changes they're anticipating and they're seeing, because that directly impacts what we do.
Okay, great. Thank you. All right, we'll move on to Brian Hughes real quick here. So Brian, let us discuss what you see as some short-term and long-term trends for users considering capital expenditures and investments.
Okay. Well, thanks for the intro, Brian, and I appreciate, for those of you that haven't met me, being a new member to the New Jersey Food Processors Association. You probably saw me on the screen nodding while David was giving his comments, because I agree with so much of what he said regarding the current dynamics. And although I don't consider myself an automatic industry expert, from my unique position as a refrigeration construction company, and also a service and maintenance division that's pretty large, I probably have a viewpoint that might be unique in the sense of who's spending money and where the dollars are going. So I'm watching the trends. My firm probably has about 200, maybe just under 200 refrigerated facilities of all different sizes and shapes under service agreement. So I'm very much, I have my fingers on the pulse of what keeps my customers up at night in the food industry, who's spending money these days and who is conserving cash and just playing defense until we get through all this. First of all, to echo what David said, there is a severe even before this started, there was a severe shortage of refrigerated space in New Jersey. In preparation for this Zoom call, I found an article that was posted by CBRE that exclaimed, not surprisingly, that New Jersey has the second largest industrial market in the country, but only as far as square footage, but only the 10th largest refrigerated square footage, which puts severe pressure on availability and thus pricing for refrigerated space, not only public, but also for private, which is going to make up a bulk of the square footage of the association's members. So we kind of look at things in two flavors. There's refrigerated space, say 34 to 60 degrees Fahrenheit for fresh product, dairy, things of that nature. And then there's the frozen side. And there is definitely the shortage for frozen space is even more acute than it is for regular cold storage. We live in a very expensive state, it's an expensive market, but the prices, there was pressure before. Right now we're seeing a little bit of a dip. Before the whole pandemic, certainly it was a seller's market. Manufacturers of refrigeration equipment were getting their number. construction, specialty trades were fully employed. And if anybody that was buying a refrigerated facility or product generally had a pretty high cost per square foot. There's a little bit of a dip, and I'm sensing a window right now. I don't know how long it's going to last, but there is definitely, the pendulum has changed. Probably for the first 90 days of this pandemic, we saw a lot of our customers pump the brakes big time. If there was a refrigerated facility or a renovation project in the works, and it was already in the pipeline, it's now coming out of the pipeline, but a lot of capital expenditures got put on hold, and we're hearing from a lot of our private food processing and distribution customers that the conversations they had about a capital expenditure, not now, maybe let's talk in 2021, maybe not ever. Really what's happening is particularly private companies, they need some reassurances that their business will come back before they start spending the big bucks. So in the short term, the service and maintenance part of our business, the fix it and just get us by, we're hearing a lot of get us through the summer, get us through the end of the fiscal year, get us through January, get us through the end of our lease. There's a lot of short-term thinking right now. For those buyers of refrigeration products and services that have money to spend, or were already like maybe on the goal line of a possible capital expenditure before this whole thing happened, you are in a unique maybe window of opportunity that won't last long, where we're seeing pricing concessions from manufacturers. For example, there's a little bit of a glut of aluminum, which is one component that makes up physical refrigeration. That's because the automotive factories were shut down, and so we saw aluminum pricing drop. We've seen labor pricing drop, where subcontractors, for example, that had a number out there that thought maybe a job was coming, are now willing to give concessions in exchange for us getting the work. So we're seeing some pricing play that we didn't see even 6 months ago. And for somebody that was going to spend, say, pick a number, $1 million on a refrigeration project, if you put that number out on the street again, you probably could get that number down to start with a 9. So I sense a little bit of a buyer's market coming up. There's also some goodies out there, Brian. I'll add on. Everybody's familiar with the PPP and some of the legislation that has come to help small businesses and privately owned firms. But the 2020 CARES Act, for those of you that have an eye on the accounting end of our businesses, there's some goodies in there to help deduct under Section 168 and fully write off a capital expense. And there is some things out there that will help people that are in the market to purchase right now.
So Brian, would you say that for the members that are listening to this call or will be watching the video later, it is your opinion that if you're on the fence and you've got the capital to spend, money's cheap, labor costs and material costs are down a little bit, now is the time to pull the trigger and build your facility?
Yeah, I don't think it's going to last forever. You look at some specialty trades in the construction world, electricians, plumbers, people that have a skill that help buildings get built. They were 100% employed for a few years. They had a nice long run, and now when you have 15 or 20% unemployment because there's no hotel construction, there's no, you talk to David's point, there's a little bit of a glut of labor and materials that I don't know how long it's going to be, but there is a little bit of a buyer's market coming up, and that's maybe one of the good silver linings to the cloud that we've all been trying to get out from under these last 4 months.
Wonderful, thank you. Appreciate that. Anything else you'd like to add to this topic?
No, well, there's lots of stuff that you can go into, but I agree with what David said. We had a big shortage of refrigerated space before this, and when the economy does come back, whether it's in 3 months or 3 years, it will be painful. That's not going to go away. Okay.
Thank you, Brian. Appreciate the insight from boots on the ground perspective. Hey, moving on to our third panelist, Hans from Environetics is going to talk a little bit about what what's going on in the office environment. We've had some previous webinars to discuss in the plant issues and how to deal with workers coming into the plant to make things go back. But I think we're getting to a point in the cycle where we need to start going back to the office. And Hans is going to give us a little bit of an insight as to what we can do to get our employees back to the office. And Hans, I believe you and your team have a couple of slides you'd like to share as well.
Hans, you're muted. You're muted there, so if you could hit unmute in the lower left corner.
No, Hans? Still muted. Michelle or Jess, are you able to mute him from your end, please?
Brian, he has to accept, he has to accept the.
Audio's, maybe he got an audio problem. I had that a couple times.
Hey, while we're waiting, I can just, kind of pick up on what Brian was saying. I got a report the other day. Now, this is national information, not New Jersey information, but construction pricing is down 3.6% since February. Interestingly, concrete products were up 0.9%, steel products were up, and other products were down. So it kind of speaks to what Brian's saying. It's a good time to do capital projects if you're.
That's about right. Yeah, I agree with that. Just from a gut, that's right.
Can you guys hear me?
Yes, we can. Thanks.
Okay, I apologize. I had a blank screen on my side, so I think I have it resolved.
Don't worry, Hans.
All right, sorry about that.
So,
go ahead, sorry.
I was going to say, what are some of the best measures to comfort staff in order for them to return to work?
Well, the office, as you mentioned earlier, there's been a lot of studies done on the office environment and how we get back to work, business as usual. And as we all are aware, we're all kind of find ourselves in uncharted waters. It's really where we are. This is very unique to all types of businesses and different fronts. We did a little study, we call it HEFA, Healthy Environment for All. And we looked into a lot of the common office concerns. And, in the past, office space, especially in Manhattan, we were in fact packing in employees like tuna. We had benching where people were sitting cheek to jowl. Obviously, that's going to change pretty dramatically moving forward, at least for the short term. And short term can be 6 months. It's more likely to be a year or 3 years. Anybody's guess in that regard. But there's a lot of things that we can do. The biggest concern, I think, and one of the very positive aspects of what came out of this whole pandemic is that working from home has been viewed very positively. In my office, my company, we have a little over 100 employees. I was never a fan of working from home for some reason. I thought that folks were getting over on me, which is not a great way to look, but I'm kind of old school in that regard. I'm very, very impressed how my staff and things I've read also from other folks who have now experienced the work from home aspect, and it's been very, very positive. So just recently there was an article in the New York Times where some of the highest square foot leasers in Manhattan were interviewed, the insurance companies and such. And I think just about every one of them that was currently renting space like 250,000 square feet and up, all said collectively that they feel that they could reduce their footprint significantly. Some say as much as 50%, perhaps more. That's going to impact the office market. So we have to be very creative and understanding of allaying fears of employees coming back to work. There are a lot of different ways to do that, a lot of which we're all very familiar with: the social distancing, the masks, the temperature checks as we walk into the work environment. The mechanical systems, there are UV filtering systems that are now available to clean office ductwork and create clean environments. The number of air changes in an office environment has to increase as well significantly. You know, we also do a lot of food service project, mostly on the end user in the food chain, right? So there's the manufacturing end, and then there's that now the delivery end on the hospitality side. The restaurants that can make their employees feel most comfortable and they are most transparent with their operation, with their sanitation procedures, are going to be the ones that are most successful. Obviously, good food has to be a standard or a given. In the office environment, it's very similar in that we have to create environments in the office that make our employees feel comfortable coming back. We created some criteria in our office. We even went down to the point where we start defining the circulation flow through the office. You know, you want to have one-way flow in one direction. You want to avoid traffic jams. I'm talking about employee traffic jams. You want to look at all those high touch point areas, like the refrigerator door in the coffee in the lunchroom, the coffee machine, the water cooler. All these things have to be wiped down, sanitized on a very regular basis. We're looking at redesigning existing office furniture. We don't want to suggest that you need to go out and take your old furniture and start new. That's not what we're suggesting. But in office areas, we start talking about maybe bringing back a percentage of the staff and phasing that return to the office. Maybe you start with 25% and then and the rest work from home until 50% can come back, and then 75%. We could make modifications in office cubes. I think what you can see up on the screen is a typical office cube, right? So this is 6 employees, and maybe these desk-mounted dividers are something that give employees a little bit more assurance. Perhaps those dividers need to extend out a little further so that you get some more coverage, right? So there's some of these smaller gestures we could make that day 2, again, whether it's a month from now or 6 months from now or 6 years from now, can be removed or they remain in place. Someone said earlier that there's going to be a lot of new ways to define and design the way we do business, not just in the office, in the manufacturing plant. I think a lot of that stuff will be here long term, and probably for good reason. Again, there are a lot of different ways we can assure the safety or build up the confidence in an office environment. But really all it takes is one person to get by the gatekeeper, so to speak, and an entire office can be affected. So you have to be very vigilant in your sanitizing procedures. Again, I very highly recommend taking temperatures when people come in the front door. Of course, that's not the end all, because in the beginning of the day, you could have not have a temperature. By the end of the day, you have a temperature. So that doesn't cure all, but those type of steps, personal responsibility by the employees also is a big deal. And everybody has to be very vigilant about health matters and health consciousness. So.
Hans, I appreciate the insight. You talked a little bit about partitioning in walls and circulation patterns and so forth. Do you have any advice on rotating schedules?
Yeah, I think that I mentioned earlier that you know, we started with a 25% back to the office, and Those that don't feel comfortable coming back to the office should be given consideration that they can work from home. Again, having come off such a very positive response from folks working at home, I honestly believe people were working 125% instead of, maybe the 80% you get on a regular day. So that's sort of phasing back to the office where we start with, this much folks in the office and this much folks from home. Somewhere along the line that's going to even out. And then eventually, I suggest that the work from home crowd is going to maybe diminish to, zero, perhaps, in a perfect world. What I think is important in an office setting, that we don't go out and completely trash the furniture we have now just to create a space that is so isolated that in, when this is over and there's a vaccine found, that folks won't want to work in that office because it's too isolated. So you got to be careful how you balance that. And that's why I start talking about these temporary partitions. And there are many other ways to do that. But, the fresh air into the space, looking heavily into the ventilation system, because we all know through ventilation systems, someone on one side of the office that may be ill, that could be spread to the other side of the office. So that has to be given some special consideration.
Thank you. Appreciate that. Anything else you'd like to add to this this topic of getting people back to work and reentry from an office?
Again, it is an ever-evolving issue. I think, again, the transparency with your employees is very important. You got to let them know what you're doing. You have to be doing something, but let them know what you're doing to promote and create safe work environments.
Great. Appreciate the insight and your time. Thank you.
You're welcome.
So we do have a question to go out to all the panelists. Is there a geographic region that you see picking up fastest, assuming things continue to improve? East PA, South New Jersey, 95 corridor, the like. This may be a David question.
Yeah, I guess I'll tackle that one. So the areas that we're seeing pick back up the quickest are the areas that were doing the best prior, sort of pre-COVID. So on the PA side of the river, the Lehigh Valley and the central PA sort of Harrisburg market, we're leading the charge. A little bit in Philadelphia, although Philadelphia proper seems to have stubbed its toe a little bit. There was this rush to come in and develop industrial space in the Philadelphia area to sort of capture the last mile users in the supply chain. That's, putting a warehouse in an urban area that enables you to facilitate same-day delivery. And while a couple of those have been absorbed, we haven't seen the level of activity pick back up yet in the Philadelphia proper industrial availabilities. On the Jersey side of the river, I don't cover sort of anything north of Trenton really, but I have my finger on the pulse of that market. And what I'm hearing from the central and northern New Jersey folks is that it's picked right back up sort of where it left off. There's been no degradation of value and rental rates, and prices have actually increased, albeit at a slower rate than they had pre-COVID. In southern New Jersey, it's really kind of I describe it as the north and south pole, or sort of a barbell effect in South Jersey. We're still seeing a lot of activity and a lot of development in that northern Burlington County market. That's sort of Burlington up to Bordentown. And then in southern Gloucester County in southern New Jersey, we're seeing a lot of activity, certainly in the lower Gloucester County market, as well as the northern Salem County market.
Okay, thank you. We've got another question here. Brian Hughes, this may be for you, or Hans. You may also be able to answer this. It's a solar energy question. The question is, solar energy panel prices have dropped significantly and financial incentives are strong. What is your perspective on the possibilities for new solar projects?
I
You
think,
want me to start?
yeah, solar is very interesting. It works very well when the government is, giving out SRECs and, the money that's available for that. I'm not on top of that as much as I should be. When the solar RECs are high, the market does very, very well. And when the solar RECs are low, it doesn't do so well. So I think it's a direct correlation. I think the solar projects are fantastic. We've done a bunch of them ourselves. And it's just, it's really a no-brainer, but they live or die on the solar RECs.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah,
Brian.
I absolutely agree with that. My own opinion is that solar does not make sense without a serious coupon from the government, whether it's Trenton or somewhere else. And a lot of stars have to align to put solar in. You have to, generally speaking, you need to own your building or have a cooperative landlord that will help sponsor a capital expenditure like that.
Yeah.
And you have to have some reasonable assurances that you're going to stay in that building so you get your ROI. Right now, I feel that the solar market's going to be a little bit paused as companies get their feet back under them. Some of them are doing so well in this pandemic, particularly if you're selling to grocery stores or Costco's or Walmart's as a food production company, that they're not sure they're going to stay because they may not have enough space. So it's one thing if you may be leaving because you have a building that's too big, but the other thing is that if you have a building that's too small, so you really got to be double sure before you put solar in. But great question.
Okay, great. Well, thank you, everyone. We don't seem to have any other questions coming through. So I guess we'll conclude on this. So on behalf of the New Jersey Food Processors Association, I'd like to thank you for joining us. I'd like to thank the panelists as well for their time. We also want to talk about after our recent program with Pete Severino related to digital transformation and its the impact on e-commerce. If you were not able to join us, please take a look for the recording on our Facebook page. It ties very well into this discussion. And next up, on July 9th, we will be talking about consumer trends and the emerging market. So building upon what we just learned today, looking at those emerging market consumer trends with more on the workforce and the pros and cons and new practices with remote business. We've got a lot in store. So finally, on behalf of the NJFPA, another thank you to our sponsors, M&T Bank and Stokes Equipment. Thank you and have a good day.
Okay, have a good summer, everybody.
Thank you.